Quick heads up before we get started. If winter weather ever makes potty breaks, walks, or paw care feel stressful, I put together a winter paw protection guide to help. It covers how to protect Doodle's paws from ice and salt, what to use before and after outings, and how to make winter routines easier without overthinking it. You can grab it complimentary at thedoodlepro.com/winter. All right, let's get into today's episode.
To swap a nuisance behavior for fear is pretty much malpractice.
Doodle dogs are easy to fall in love with, but living with one can feel overwhelming if you don't have the right guidance. I'm Corinne Gearhart, known as the Doodle Pro, and I help Doodle parents build calmer, more connected, and more rewarding relationships with their dogs using positive science-based training. I've spent years working exclusively with Doodles across many different mixes and personalities, and I understand what makes them wonderfully unique and sometimes uniquely challenging. On this podcast, I bring you practical, compassionate guidance, along with insights from trusted training, grooming, and veterinary professionals, so you can get Doodle-specific answers that actually fit your real life. I'm so glad you're here. Let's help you parent your Doodle like a pro. Jean, I am so grateful that you are here. I studied under you in the Academy of Dog Trainers, and your work has shaped so much of my approach, especially helping parents understand their dogs without slipping into moral interpretations. And I just want to say congratulations on the Academy celebrating its 25th year. What an extraordinary legacy.
Thank you. And I'm equally grateful to all that you do, Corinne.
In our class, Zoomies to Zen, I had invited you to join us as our guest author for our book club, and we read The Culture Clash. And that's still the book that I recommend more than any other for people who want to understand working with their dog.
Oh, I'm so gratified to hear that.
Thank you.
We just want to be helpful.
So I wanted to get first into the culture clash and why humans can really misunderstand dogs, but especially Doodles. Many Doodle parents relate their dogs like almost to funny furry humans.
Yeah.
And I even had the New York Times reach out last year asking me about this trend. So from your perspective and in your work in the culture clash, can you share how anthropomorphism shapes misunderstandings about dog behavior?
Yes. There's a few things. One is if we stretch assigning human attributes to dogs, if we extend that to morality, we can find ourselves in the quicksand of trying to morally improve them. And this can start to be a sort of a segue to harsh training methods where it sort of feels like, the dog knows what he did. He knows it's wrong. And this sort of warrants some sort of punishment. And historically, dogs have had very, very poor treatment meted out at them by humans. And over, one of the justifications you see is that the dog, quote unquote, knows he's doing wrong. And so it's this pretext for being really just nasty to dogs as soon as we assign them morality. And there's no evidence that dogs have the kind of moral software that humans come with. So first off the bat, it's just not true. They just aren't like that. And there's something kind of sad about sort of saying, well, they're humans, as though their dogginess isn't kind of good enough and it would be better or somehow improving them. And, we would like them better and they'd be just a little bit fancier if they were human-like. What is so good about humans? There's an implication there that somehow our way is better, that our sort of, act in the talent show of being very clever and using language and that sort of thing is somehow superior. And I just don't buy that. It's for sure interesting. Humans are a great species and very interesting, but so are dogs, their dogginess is good enough. I mean, they're just fine as they are. We don't need to try and stretch and, contort things and say, wow, they're humans, as though that's somehow better.
I love that. And in your book, you kind of talk about the Disneyfication of dogs and that we really hang on to them being more than just a dog. And you touch on like all the damage we could do if we're applying the way we think to them. And a dog in itself is pretty remarkable.
They're fine as they are. It's
Mhm.
kind of, we have, I mean, in sort of recent years, it's become to light the way that young girls, especially, can, suffer anxiety and depression because
Yeah.
they're comparing themselves, kind of the social media feeds of celebrities with full hair and makeup and that they end up with sort of low self-esteem because they're comparing themselves to something that really isn't real. And if we start to hold dogs up to, Walt Disney or Lassie type things, which
Yeah.
are fiction, these are all sort of, they're made to look, unrealistic for narrative purposes. Then dogs end up sort of suffering. They end up coming up wanting. And I really worry about that.
I completely agree. And you talk a lot in the book about how then we are assuming their intent and that they feel guilty or they're being stubborn. And a lot of that leads us to be more punitive than to
It
be
does.
better trainers.
Right, right.
Mhm.
It is quite the irony that, as soon as we Disneyfy dogs, they end up sort of getting the shorter end of the stick vis-a-vis
Yeah.
how we're treating them.
And it doesn't mean our relationship, if we see them as dogs, needs to be any less
Yeah.
than it should.
No, it's one of the wonders of the universe, how, two
Yeah.
species can we meld so well together. That's one of the greatest inventions of humans, really, is dogs.
When we think about doodles in particular, you can't make a doodle without a poodle. A lot of people are really drawn to, I want the intelligence of a poodle. And you talk a little bit about the kind of misnomer of the intelligence label
Yeah.
when it comes to dogs. Can you share a little more of that?
Yeah, I think we're using sort of the wrong yardstick here.
Mhm.
It's like kind of like saying, Corinne, are you sort of the right shade of orange? It's like it's asking the wrong question. What breed is intelligent, or what dogs are intelligent, or we value intelligence in dogs?
Mhm.
Intelligence is sort of an overrated thing. And I think it comes down once again to humans overvaluing ourselves, that because
Yeah.
we're clever, therefore clever is the way that we measure goodness. Clever is sort of the
Mhm.
one yardstick to measure how a species is worthy. It's just sort of remarkable. Steven Pinker famously said that we don't sort of talk about the jumping ability of you. We don't measure marsupialism, whether we have good enough pouches or jumping ability. It's not the way we measure humans.
Brilliant.
And you think it's hilarious, to say that, but it's equally hilarious to say that brain power, sort of computing power in one's brain,
Mhm.
is somehow more important than any other attribute that a species uses to make a living in the world. We are not the be all end all. We are sort of a relatively recent bleep on these, in the evolutionary playing field. And it remains to be seen whether we've got any kind of staying power. So, I think we should be a little bit cautious about using human attributes as the way to measure, the superiority of another species. I mean, dogs are fantastic as they are.
Yes. And understanding them better is something that you
Yeah.
accomplish so well in this book. And when you're kind of talking about how we use our value system and are applying them to dogs, I see that when people are selecting a breed and I want an Aussie. I want the smartest, that'll be the fastest to
Yeah.
train, the most capable. When it comes to doodles, I want an Aussie doodle. I'm going to
Yeah.
combine the two that are
Yeah.
on the list for the smartest. And that can kind of bite them,
Yeah, and
no pun
P.S.
intended.
P.S. I mean, there's no science really on, what we would you or I would probably define as intelligence. Okay, sort of problem
Mhm.
solving ability, sort of, a sort of a wide cognitive toolbox. It's
Mhm.
not something that's been studied in dogs. I would venture that probably what's more important from the perspective of, okay, so why would an Aussie Doodle be such sort of a training machine? They're
Mhm.
easy to motivate. They're what we call drivey. Okay,
Yeah.
so they're soft. So if you raise your voice, they, oh, sorry, and people say, well, I'm not being harsh. I'm just, I just said no. They're easy to train with food. They're easy to train with toys, and that ease of training can sometimes be checked off as intelligence, where it's
Mhm.
probably more ease of motivation. I mean, there's some hounds and some Asian breeds and stuff where they're harder to motivate, but I'm not sure that they're stupider, once you get their number. So once you do get them motivated, they seem to learn just as well as your Aussie Doodles. So I'm not sure that there's accuracy about the Aussie Doodle thing, or Border Collies, or, Malinois, or whatever have you. I think we need to, first of all, control for how easy they are to motivate in training.
And you dive, I mean, I highly recommend this book, but you dive in so deeply into kind of the fallout and the misnomers of eager to please, and my dog should just want to please me, and that should be enough. And when we're talking about the features, particularly with our doodle mixes, of being softer, and that sensitivity means even more dramatic fallout from some of those outdated methods.
Right. It's easier to flatten them, So it's like if you had a sensitive human being that was sensitive, more anxious or more sensitive, you'd want to be gentler with them, and be more careful. If you had a child who was sensitive, so if you've got a dog who is more sensitive, you want to be mindful about that and not traumatize them. I mean, they're more easily traumatized by something that might not traumatize a quote unquote harder dog. And so, I mean, the eager to please thing is just the worst idea that anybody ever came up with. It's inaccurate, for one thing. So anybody who claims that they're training on that basis, tell them, okay, can you do this without your special collars, without, frightening and scaring and hurting dogs? Can you still train them with just the eager to please? And lo and behold, if you take away their special collars, suddenly they're not getting the job done. So there's a very well-known saying in dog training, which is no motivation, no training. So as soon as you take away motivation, it's a non-starter. You can't even start to train a dog if you haven't got something that motivates them.
And I repeat this with my students and listeners. My motto is, we do the best with what we know. And if you're just watching some TV and you're listening to your neighbor and your grandpa, like, you just are trying, you love your dog and you're trying what you've heard and what you've seen. And I mean, dogs are incredibly resilient and social creatures that want to be with us and learn new ways. If you've tried those methods before, all isn't lost. You can still work with your dog a different way.
Dogs put up with a lot from us, and they're very familiar. I think there's a lot of folk knowledge out there about dogs because everybody sort of had one, and a lot of people kind of fancy themselves good with dogs or a dog expert because they've kind of had one and they kind of sort of made it work. Usually that's because dogs are really good at fitting into human society, even if we don't kind of do it optimally. And luckily now we've got more research than ever before. We've got sort of more, a wider sort of swath of people who've been training dogs without hurting them for now probably a few decades and getting the job done on all sort of problem types, all breed types, that we now have the technology to do that. So I think the excuse of sort of, making it up as you go along and doing not a very good job is less than it used to be. We need to kind of access the best possible information.
And thanks in great part to your leadership in the field on this. So
I'm one of many, many.
We're so appreciative to you and the rest that have kind of forged this path. In my Doodle Pro Academy, I have some students that share kind of practical training questions. And while they were reading your book, I wanted to just bring some of them into our talk today, because most dog parents don't get the direct chance to talk with you. You're shaping the minds and training of trainers everywhere. So I'm just going to share a couple of these questions with you as we go.
Sure.
Quick pause. This interview was originally recorded live inside the Doodle Pro Honor Society. Quick pause. This interview was originally recorded live inside the Doodle Pro Honor Society during one of our private book club discussions with Jean Donaldson. With that month's guest, with that book club's author, Jean Donaldson. Honor Society members didn't just listen. They joined live, submitted questions, and engage directly with this author and industry leader in real time. Public listeners hear these conversations months later. Honor Society members are in the room when they happen. If you'd like to get access to expert discussions like this, join the Doodle Pro Honor Society today. Let's get back to our chat. One of our students, thank you, and I have no doubt, one of our students is trying to work with some demand barking, which isn't one of our favorite phrases, but she said, my dog trots into his crate for timeouts, but doesn't seem to learn his lesson. And I thought this was an excellent example of how timeouts actually work as opposed to our human moral frame. Sit and stay right there. We'll be back right after this quick break. Quick pause. If you're listening to this episode and are thinking, okay, I get that concept, but I need help with my specific doodle and my specific situation, that's exactly what the Doodle Pro Academy's Honor Society is for. Every month, I do a live Q&A where you can talk about your doodle. I bring in expert guests, trainers, vets, groomers, behavior specialists. You get a searchable library of resources and a private community of doodle parents who get it. It's $37 a month. You can cancel anytime. And right now, it's open to everyone. And for the first time in years, it's open to everyone right now, not just my course alumni. Learn more at thedoodlepro.com/honor society.
Yeah. And so if it's not working, then you have to sort of say, okay, so why is it not working? Now, a few of the things that can usually get in the way of timeouts working well. One is that it's not applied every time. So timeouts is one of those things where you got to do it every time. And sometimes, humans, we're like anybody, oh boy, it's such a pain in the butt to, make this happen. Yeah. And so if it's only happening some of the time, then dogs they can learn the loopholes about, when is she really serious and when is, maybe I can push the envelope a little bit. Dogs are really good at that kind of stuff. The other thing is, if you think about timeouts, they're sort of like a fine. So, if you get a parking ticket, so let's say you're parking somewhere and you're in a big city and the parking ticket that you're anticipating getting is $15, but it would cost you $50 to put the thing in a garage. You might say, you know what, I'm going to take the ticket. It's better. I'm actually ahead with the ticket. I'm going to go ahead and transgress. So sometimes if the timeout is not, if the dog kind of like, well, I just kind of soon be in my crate anyway for, a minute, then it's not enough of a fine. So sometimes what we say in dogs is if a $5 fine is not working, try a $500 fine. Try something where he's really removed, where he does what he's, if he does something he doesn't want and you want, so give him a consequence. Okay, so how about he's in the bathroom and he's sitting there for 5 minutes rather than 30 seconds? Try different kinds of fines to see if you can get one that is, and dog says, you know what, that's actually kind of not worth my while. The other thing is that if you're trying to apply fines to behavior that's extremely wired in, now sometimes quote unquote demand barking is pretty volitional. In other words, the dog's got sufficient control over it that, a consequence is going to kind of hit it. But some things, if they're really wired in, and guess who did the wiring? And by the way, it's us. So we selectively bred. So, we often say to miniature schnauzer people, because they get all manner of what we call watchdog barking. We spend 100 generations breeding in this, super sensitivity to environmental change and the tendency to kind of bark at it. And then we say, you know what, I don't want it. So it's a kind of a dirty trick. Yeah. Please don't do it anymore. And depending on how strongly it's wired in, it can be a little tougher to modify. So that might be the reason why.
And I found, and this is specific to this student, the pup is happily trotting into the crate and laying down for 30 seconds. And it sounds to me like a pattern. The dog's kind of learning the pattern there, as opposed to seeing it as a fine.
Yeah, it's kind of a pattern that's not a very expensive fine. He's doing is kind of a game, and and why not next time? And if the demand barking is working part of the time, so if a percentage of the time he barks to be let out or to get attention or to get a snacky or to get patting or to get you to look at him or what have you, if it's working a percentage of the time, that's going to support it.
Hmm. And I know we have some positive reinforcement trainers listening. And a common question I've heard in your program is, well, aren't we creating a negative connotation to the crate if we use the crate for that removal?
It's a rather long-winded answer. I mean, I'll try to give you the TLDR, version of it, which is,
Yes.
the aren't we creating, in other words, our intention doesn't make the crate negative. So if the dog already likes his crate and you use the crates for timeouts, it's not a timeout. You're not going to ruin the crate. You're just not going to get much of an effect. It's like saying, whenever you do something I don't like, I'm going to happy talk you. And because my intention is that this is a timeout, then, oh, am I going to destroy happy talk? No, you're just going to support the behavior. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't work that way. You can't ruin the crate or give the crate negative connotations just because you're intending to use it as timeout. If the dog likes the crate, he likes the crate. Now, here's the thing. The dog probably likes the crate when he wants to be in it. So let's say there's sometimes he wants to go in there to nap or to be alone or to, chew on a chew or what have you. He wants it at that time. If at this time he wants to be outside the crate, then it could very well work as a consequence to put him in the crate. I often say to people who wrestle with this concept, imagine a thought experiment where we're all in the crate together. So let's say you had a big enough crate and you're in the crate with the dog and you're all, you're hanging out and you're doing stuff and you're holding a chew for him and he does something you don't like and you put him outside the crate. And if that functions as a timeout, are you then corrupting? Are you ruining the outside world? It really is about, making things worse for the dog in terms of where he would like to be. It's not about the crate per se.
Mm-hmm. And
sometimes people can get their heads around that and sometimes they can't. If people actually can't, then the easiest thing is to punt and to say, okay, you don't have to use the crate, or you could have two crates, have evil crate and good crate, or use the laundry room, or just leave, or you leave the room. There's a lot of ways to accomplish this. You don't have to use a crate.
And to challenge ourselves to not use our child rearing or school kind of human thought process about it. This isn't a naughty spot or a dunce cap where we're shaming or like a it is a punishment in a way of child rearing.
Yeah.
This is removing access from the yummy, great stuff. And
it's making something not work.
Yeah.
It's just saying it's eradicating the success of something you don't like. So dogs do what works. And if you can make something absolutely not work, in other words, dog says, this was really getting me X. Now, not only is it not getting me X, it's, I'm going back a few yards. Suddenly he's going to change his mind about doing it. It's nonviolent. Dogs don't have shame the way that humans do. And that is something that is very important to understand.
Yes, thank you. Another question that was shared kind of with the human emotion piece, a student said panting is confusing. Sometimes it's excitement, sometimes it's stress, sometimes frustration. How do you help people understand arousal without projecting human emotion onto it?
It's a great question, and it's a tough one, and I don't have magic there. I can say that panting is often what we call an artifact. In other words, it's not, a sign of something insidious. The primary way that dogs cool themselves off, and dogs are very good at tolerating cold generally. They're not very good at tolerating heat. And so dogs pant very readily to lower their body temperature. And so panting is not always a sign of anything. Dogs also pant kind of when they're having fun. Not all stress is negative. So you want to be careful about that. Same thing with dilated pupils. If dogs are in a dark room, their pupils are going to be dilated. If you open up the treat cupboard, their pupils are going to dilate. Doesn't mean, anything insidious. So but panting can be. So if panting is in conjunction with the dog kind of looking frozen in place and staring straight ahead and panting and kind of being unwilling to move, you have kind of that, fight, flight, freeze. If it's looking like that, then a reasonable inference is that dog is stressed. If they're playing with a buddy or they're hot, then you want to first rule out, okay, is this dog just cooling off? Now, arousal is a problematic concept. It's a few years ago, it kind of caught fire and everyone's like, oh my God, arousal, it's the bad thing. But here's the thing, it's not very specific. Dogs can be aroused when they're playing with their dog buddy. They're aroused when they're playing tug. They're aroused when they're doing zoomies. They're aroused when they're happy. we don't want to eradicate that. We do want to
Yeah.
eradicate dogs who are anxious, afraid, worried. We don't want that. We don't want dogs to be, to have those emotions. Arousal is too broad an umbrella. We want to be a little bit more careful about saying that joy is great, but fear is not great.
Yeah. And your book, you give specific instructions on how to kind of fill the needs with arousal in the right way with tug and fetch, and that tug isn't all bad. And here's
Yeah.
how to channel, like if you can fill those needs, they're not needing to find it another way.
That's right. Yeah, there's two sort of models that compete with each other. One
Mhm.
is the original sort of Conrad Lorenz, so the ethologist Conrad Lorenz, which is what we call the hydraulic model, which is that we
Yeah.
have needs. Okay, we need food, we need water, we need air, and a lot of these things that are basic needs, they wax and wane depending on how recently you've had them. So if you've just eaten Thanksgiving dinner, you're not going to be hungry. It's going to be hard to motivate you with food. If it's just
Mhm.
before, you are going to be hungry. So that need for food is going to change based on your blood sugar. Your need for water is going to wax and wane. And in dogs, the need to sort of move and to sort of do stuff is going to wax and wane depending on whether they've had some or not.
Mhm.
There's another competing model, which we call kind of the Pandora's box model, which is if you let
Yeah.
dogs do something, they're just going to do it more. And that flies in the face of everything we actually know about animal behavior, that you don't sort of make things worse by filling a need. So people will say, oh my God, if you
Mhm.
play fetch, I don't know if you remember 2 or 3 years ago, people were saying, don't play fetch
Like ever.
because then they're
Yeah.
just going to want more and you make them obsessed. Hang on
Yeah.
a second. The breeding made them obsessed. The fetch is an outlet for what is something that we bred into them. You don't make them that way. Depriving animals of food doesn't make them want food less. Depriving
Mhm.
animals of movement doesn't make them more calm. It's just not how it works. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, there is this competing model out there that somehow calm is good, moving is bad, moving is stress, joy is bad, joy is arousal, joy is just, and it just becomes this big sort of mishmash that's really,
Yeah.
we need to kind of, let's think about this and let's pull it apart a little bit and unpack what we mean when we say arousal and the other thing is this value judgment that somehow activity is worse than not moving.
Yes. Yes. I
Hang
agree.
on a second. If you don't want activity, you can certainly adopt a chow, but if you're going to get a dog who's got activity level, they're going to be active and it's not bad. It's not worse, but you
Mhm.
do need to meet the need.
They're not stuffed animals.
They
Like,
are not. And
yes,
Doodles in particular, I mean, in terms of activity level, they're up there.
they are. And when you're talking about those competing models, that was a big trend for a bit with like being pro-social. Don't let your dog play with any other
Yeah.
dogs. So then they won't try to greet other dogs on walks.
That was so pernicious. I mean, it came from
Yeah.
the sort of people who do dog sports, where
Mhm.
it's much more convenient to have a dog who's quote unquote asocial. So a dog who's a little bit uncomfortable with other dogs, who's under socialized, we would sort of
Right.
say, they're not then distracted. They don't want to go up to dogs. They don't want to go up to people. They're going to focus better at your competitive events. Okay, now I'm not sure I'm wild about that, but then to
Right.
extrapolate that and say that this is now how we should have all dogs. So people who have companion dogs, that we should under
Mhm.
socialize them so they're just a little bit uncomfortable and they don't want to go up to people or dogs. If you take that just a little bit further, then suddenly we've got fear and aggression, and fear
Right.
is the hardest thing to get rid of. And
Yeah.
so the height of irresponsibility is to say we should under socialize dogs so that they are more convenient. Why not? Let's socialize them and then also teach them manners.
And fill that cup. Like, yes.
Right. Yeah. I think it's a very, luckily that idea fell by the wayside, didn't have any legs,
Mhm. Yeah.
but I remember like you do.
And that's why in puppy classes, you'll have little play breaks to like fill that need. So
Yeah.
yeah, that
Right. They're
desire
puppies.
isn't
They're
just building and
babies.
building. Yes.
Yeah.
Another thing that people can misinterpret when we're talking about the high energy needs and stuff with doodle behavior, jumping, people can see that as friendliness or disobedient or that they're being dominant.
Oh,
over them. We hear
still.
that a little bit. I know.
Yeah.
But for some dogs, it can also be anxiety and trying to create distance. Can you kind of talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, jumping generally.
Mhm.
Generally speaking, dogs jump up in the context in which they jump up when we are novel to them. So if you go away for
Yes.
4 hours and you come back, it's when they want to jump on you. Dogs are
Mhm.
wired to greet other beings with a lot of sort of face-to-face contact, sniffing
Yes.
each other's muzzles. Sometimes there's licking and so on. We have the mistake of being vertical. So our faces are up high, and for them to access our faces, they jump. Then we go crazy with the interpretations about this.
Mhm.
Jumping, generally speaking, jumping up is pro-social. In other words, I work on chows all day, every day. And what these people would give when they've got a dog who doesn't like people, they would give anything to have the problem of a dog who's too pro-social, because trying to fix a dog who's not pro-social, who's asocial or
Mhm.
antisocial, is a big
Mhm.
order. So it's a nice problem to have, jumping up, because what you do is you just gradually teach them an alternative behavior. When you're greeting, please sit, or please keep 4 on the floor. And if you do that, there's going to be snacks, there's going to be attention. And if you can do it, I mean, some people are comfortable, some people are not. Facial
Mhm.
proximity, get down to their level and let them sniff and lick your face.
Yeah.
That's what they're compelled to do. They're compelled to do it the way that we're compelled to do things like smile at each other. We have a lot of social conventions like shaking hands, or things that we do that are human norms. And one of the
Mhm.
norms in dog culture is facial proximity and face-to-face contact after absence, or when greeting, or when being obsequious, etc.
And the behavior they're doing what works. It's functional. It's not moral. It's
No,
no.
they think they're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
In dog society, it's the polite thing to do. They're
Mhm.
compelled to do it. They're once again, it's sort of they're saddled with a genetic legacy of, this is the way that when dogs meet, they sniff rears and they sniff each other's faces. And with us, they want that facial proximity. Dogs like to lick faces. They want to be near our faces.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and so one of the best, put it this way: if all this other stuff was the problem, then why is training the dog to sit? Why does it work so well?
Mhm.
Why not just train the dog to sit and stop the over interpretation?
Yes. And unfortunately, I mean, I'm grateful to have them, but I have a lot of students that come to me frustrated with their doodle jumping, and they have gotten advice saying knee them in the chest,
Aches.
or they've had someone use a shock collar or e-collar
Oh gosh.
when they're jumping. And do you mind sharing a little bit what the fallout is of when they've been doing what they've been taught to do by trainers or neighbors, et cetera, and doing
Yeah,
those things?
when I first got into training, those of us who sort of were not versus inclined, we didn't want to do it. And luckily, we could get the job. Then you can teach sit without a shock collar. Any trainer who can't teach a dog to sit without a shock collar is not competent.
Mhm.
This is not hard to do. You basically gradually escalate the degree of distraction until you're doing
Mhm.
social distractions, and and then doing it after absences and stuff. So there's one thing, which is like, hang on a second, we've got a dog trainer who can't de-jump a dog. So that's questionable. I wish I was being hyperbolic, but I'm not. That
Mhm.
is hang on, really? You can't teach sit, and you're a dog trainer? So there's that. The other thing is that now, so we're in 2025, there's research studies as long as my arm, with the sequelae, so the fallout, the side effects of using aversives to train dogs. They are
Mhm.
fear, anxiety, aggression. Okay, so then those are the hardest things to get rid of. So fear is the hardest thing to disinstall. Jumping is the
Mhm.
easiest thing, or rather not jump, but sit rather than jump is the easiest thing to teach. To
Mhm.
swap a nuisance behavior for fear is pretty much
Yeah.
malpractice.
And then that means if you've been kneeing your dog in the chest when they jump at you when you come in the
Yeah,
house,
it's kind of like
we've just
I
equated.
meet I meet you in a restaurant. You extend your hand, and I
Yeah.
slap you in the face. Like like, what? Can we do better than that?
I don't want my dog to associate me walking in the door with pain or discomfort.
Yeah, especially when he's trying to greet you. He's happy to see you.
Yeah. So yeah, they
You know,
might stop, but at what cost?
yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know. Sometimes you just got to wonder about people, like, really.
And if it's all you've been taught and you didn't know how to,
Right.
have
Yeah, you
different
don't have
behaviors.
to. You
Yeah.
teach the dog sit, you gradually increase the distractions, and then you migrate into the social context.
Yeah. There are some trainers that don't love working with doodles. And sometimes it can be doodle parents assuming that they're like just teddy bears. And I mean, they're adorable.
They are.
But when we're talking about high energy, sometimes super pro social,
Yeah.
athletic ability, and that softness,
You
that
didn't
can
even
be a
mention the
real mix.
grooming.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Even if you're just going sporty and you're getting a shave down, just the expense
Yeah, you
and
still have to
the
do it.
husbandry
It's
of
not like
it.
a
Yes.
whippet.
Yes. Is there anything that you would advise a doodle parent who's looking for a trainer? How to find one that's a good fit? Be sure to follow the Doodle Pro podcast to make sure you don't miss next week, where we dive in, where we move from theories about dog training to get right into some more practice, to some more real life troubleshooting with the Gene Donaldson. This conversation was originally recorded live inside the Doodle Pro Honor Society as part of that month's private book club discussion with Gene Donaldson. Members didn't have to wait for this to air. They joined live, participated in the discussion, and submitted their own questions to this author and industry leader, amongst many other guests. Inside the Honor Society, we regularly host live expert Q&As, book club discussions with leading voices in dog training, grooming, in dog training, book club discussions with leading voices in dog training, deeper dives into behavior topics, grooming, vet and healthcare, and more, and real-time coaching conversations with me, the Doodle Pro. If you'd like to be in the room for conversations like this, join the Doodle Pro Honor Society today at thedoodlepro.com/society. I'll see you next week for part 2. Thanks for spending this time with me. If today's episode helped you, be sure to follow the show so you don't miss what's coming next. I'll see you in the next episode. Before you go, if winter paw care is on your radar, you can grab my winter paw protection guide at thedoodlepro.com/winter. It's a simple resource to help keep paws comfortable and winter routines calmer.